Hi, this is Shelly from lightfrommysteps.com, the blog. Please check out the blog. What I want to talk to you about right now is your basic equipment setup for watercolor. And this is just a card table set up with some things that I want to talk to you about. The first really important thing you can't paint without is your palette. You don't need as many colors as I've shown here. You just, at minimum, just get your primary colors, yellow, red, and blue, balanced ones of each color, meaning not too warm, not too cool. You can paint with just those three colors. For convenience sake, when you expand your palette, you'll have a cool and a warm yellow, a cool and a warm red, and a cool and a warm blue. And then the other colors are just for convenience. You have more color harmony if you mix your colors anyway, but the colors that you do have at your disposal, put them all out, and that way you'll make better color choices automatically. This palette, I believe it's a John Pike palette, you'll notice that it has pretty deep wells. I don't clean off my palette. Paints are expensive and I don't waste them. I just leave it like that. That way I can tell what's in that well because of the messy paint that's around it. Like in the darks, I can tell what those colors are, you see, by the messiness around them. So don't let that discourage you. Whereas if you compare it to a palette over here, you can see where it's not messy, but you can't tell what the color is. It just looks like a dark blob, so it makes it hard to choose the right color. If you want to get more fluid paint, just take your spray bottle and mist over the entire thing right when you start, and keep the spray bottle handy, and that will help you to have some softer paint. And you can always put out some more paint if you wanted to use it straight from the tube. But this is one really important thing that will improve your watercolor painting immediately if you have your watercolor set up this way. I can put on my blog what the actual pigments that I have on here are. I won't take the time to list it right now. This is the cover to my palette underneath here. I just have it sitting under there. The reason I'm drawing attention to that is that it has a cover, but because this paint is sticky, it'll get stuck. And this, even though this paint's been on here for years, it never becomes completely solid, some of these colors, like this one, for instance. And so it gets sticky, and this will stick to the palette cover. And so what you'll need to do is take some saran wrap and put it over there so it'll be a barrier between the palette and the lid. That way you don't have to pry the lid off every time. You can get it separated, and it protects your paint, and it keeps it from, if you put it where it clings over there, it will keep things like this from happening. And that's a really expensive color. That's why I didn't clean it off. But that won't happen to you if you'll use the saran wrap tightly over there and then put this in a drawer. Mine always gets turned topsy-turvy somehow, but that's why that happens. What I wanted to show you too is the wells that you use for your water. It's really important that they be nice and large, and that you have a good quantity of water. Don't be sitting painting with, a little lid filled with water. Because you will, if you don't have a really big supply of clean water available to you, your colors will be muddy. And it's important to have two water vessels, one of them for your clean water and one for your dirty water. So you'll clean your brush in the one. This one, it's taller, so it doesn't matter if I can see in there because I'm only cleaning my brush anyway. But this other one, which will be my clean water, that will keep my colors clean and my painting better looking. And the one thing that I like about this one is that it has the ribs on the bottom, so that whenever I want to clean my brush, I can scrub my brush along those ribs. And then it's low, which is really important, that it be low, because I can tell, okay, if I want to go in and get a little bit of water, or if I want to submerge. But if I'm trying to put it in here, I can't really tell what I'm doing. So I'm already handicapping myself and giving over some control of my watercolor if I have my water in the wrong type of vessel, or if the vessel's too small. I just wanted to note on this one that I don't use my brushes like this. I don't put them up in this brush holder, because the paint, especially this is important if you're painting in acrylic, will flow down into that ferrule and will mess up your brush or your oil paints. And so basically you just have it there for convenience, or if you're painting in plein air, to keep them, you know, corralled, you might use that. But I don't use that for that reason. Instead I keep my paint brushes to the side on a towel. That way the pigment will run out. They'll dry properly. They'll have the proper shape, but pigment won't get stuck and dried up in the ferrule, which can ruin your brush. If acrylic especially gets dried up in there, or oil, that becomes, even though it doesn't affect the next painting, it'll make that brittle, and the brushes are very expensive, and the hairs will break off because it has pigment dried in around that. Another thing I wanted to point out about this well is not to do this. I mean, more than a couple minutes, you just don't. I don't even get in the habit of leaving that there, because it misshapes the brush. And your brushes are quite an investment. And then the water will cause your ferrule here to become loosened, because this will crack. Just long and short of it, you'll end up ruining your brush if you leave it there. So don't do that. But it is worthwhile, even though I don't use these other features. I like that it's large, it's low, so I can see my water, and it has this rib on the bottom, which is important. You can make your own. Like you've seen different watercolor or different paint wells that have, or tanks that have coils and things on the bottom. That's for that's for the same purpose. I have a good selection of brushes. I just put all different types of painting brushes together. Probably shouldn't do it, but that's what I do. So they're all in the same place, because I switch back and forth to different media. Let's see. This is just a different type of palette. I like this one better because it has, like I said, nice deep wells. What I like to do too is write the pigment name on the side and the number of the pigment if possible, so that if I like it, I can get that again, and so I do it in Sharpie. And then on this one, this is all the same type of paint, so I've even written, or if you have different styles of paint, you can write the information, because all the palettes look the same if you have more than one palette, or if you do. You might find that useful, because these will accept permanent marking pen. Here are some more supplies that you would use with watercolor. A lot of times I use a ruler as a maul stick, and what a maul stick is, it's hard. I have to hold the video, but you use it to rest your hand. Like if I'm going to do some fine detail work and I want to rest my hand and provide some stability there, I'd use a maul stick to try to so my hand doesn't shake around. Also, obviously, a straight line or to cut against, or measure things. This one's nice because you can see through, so you can judge like the relative width of something and you can see through it. So if you're trying to judge something on your painting, a transparent marker or a transparent ruler is useful. This is a piece of broken red glass that I have, but basically it's hard anymore to find rubylith film, and basically you can see how I use that to judge value of things in my painting, to see if my value is off. In that way it just knocks down the color, and so that's a good value tool. I need to be more safe and put some tape around that eventually. But these are different types of salts. I just put it in a different container, but this is rock salt and then a flake salt, but any different textures of salt will create different effects, but I keep them handy in small things separate from my cooking, because you might put your hand in there and you don't want to poison yourself. This is an old masking fluid, and it has I just wanted to draw your attention to it, even though this is probably not the kind that you get anymore. Because it had this color in it, and I have found that I remembered why I didn't use that anymore. That color tinted my watercolor just a bit. Now it didn't affect my finished result, but kind of experiment with some of your supplies. If you try a new supply for the first time, I was dubious of that when I bought it a long time ago, and it did indeed, because I was worried because it seemed so bright that if it would affect my paper, and it did. So another thing is granulation medium. Granulation medium can be used to make certain pigments that ordinarily settle out do so more, or pigments that don't ordinarily have that characteristic. You can get that characteristic using granulation medium in place of all or some of the water. This is hand soap and brush cleaner. A lot of times I just use shampoo. If you don't have to necessarily buy that. I use shampoo. Anything that you wouldn't use on your hair, don't use on your brush. This is a permanent, or opaque gouache. So if you didn't get a highlighter, you need a whiter white and you didn't reserve that out, you can put it in with gouache. This is a separate cup. Don't use your dishes that you'll eat off of with your art supplies, because they have heavy metals and toxins, and so I'm using a separate container. Even though this is a restaurant, I only use it for my watercolor painting. And this I know I always use for granulation medium, so it's a little bit left in there, but I know what it is because it's designated for that. You can also use glue. Sometimes this I do more in acrylic than watercolor, but sometimes when you have a white, I have a white that I want to stay white and I know it's going to be exactly where it is and I'm not going to remove it, you can either mask it off with glue or with paraffin. This is a paraffin wax pencil. Or if another way to get your white back in small areas of detail, this is a razor blade. You can scrape it out. Also, you can make textures that way. You could do the same thing, get white back or create texture by using